What's the most wholesome thing a stranger has done for you? When I was working as a cashier, an older man pulled out $1 and asked if I wanted to see something cool. Slightly skeptical, I said sure. He folded it into a little shoe and gave it to me, and it was the cutest thing. Then he told me, "Well, you can't just have one shoe," and folded another into a second shoe, and I still have them on my desk because I didn't have it in me to unfold them. In college, flying to visit my father for spring break. The airport was 45 minutes away from campus and I didn't have a car. After my ride left, the flight was delayed until the next day, and the airline said that because I lived nearby I didn't qualify for a hotel room for the night. A lovely couple gave me their hotel room voucher, as they'd decided to drive through the night instead. It helped me out when I was in a really tight spot. Not me, but my sister. She got severely sunburned while on holidays in Sri Lanka. We thought she was feeling better as she spent the whole previous day in bed. We went on a trip to a waterfall in the jungle. We were friends with locals who brought us. After swimming in the water, her skin starts burning to the point where she is in tears and won't let anyone touch her. We have nothing to help her. Maybe 5 minutes later, some local villagers appear with aloe vera plants and proceed to gently rub it onto her skin. Total strangers who saw the situation went to their house and brought the aloe vera. It was so kind, I couldn't believe it. We ended up talking to them and they made us all dinner, which we ate together from a bucket in the middle of the jungle. Unforgettable. A guy in France, I asked for directions. Not only he walked me to the place, but he also kept me company and chatted while I visited it. He left after 15 minutes though because he had an appointment. A stranger who used to be a customer at my job took me aside once and told me she has seen my journey over the years and is so proud of me. She started crying and gave me a hug. I wish I could tell her how much that meant to me. I had just moved to a new town and had started a brand new job at a high school a few towns over. I lived 40 minutes away from my work and it was the first day of school for students. I went to start my car that morning and it wouldn't turn on, the engine had died. I had no way of getting to work and I started to panic. I wanted to make a good impression at my new school and it was my first professional job out of college. There was no way I would be able to find coverage in time and it was the first day for students and a brand new job for me. Not a good look if I didn't show up. I didn't know anyone yet to call, and this was before Uber was around. One of my new neighbors who was retired and also up super early walking their dog saw me outside of my car on the verge of a meltdown. They insisted on driving me to work that morning. They refused money for gas. They didn't let me feel guilty about the distance or the situation and told me they were so happy to help BC they didn't have anything else going on that day. I was able to make it to my new job on time and everything else fell into place that day. I later found out that they were actually in the middle of a big move and were in the process of moving across the country that week since they had just retired. I still get emotional thinking about that morning and the overabundance kindness shown to me that day. Many years ago, when my brother and I were traveling to Finland on a whim and most places were booked out, a Finnish student we encountered and asked for a youth hostel spontaneously let us sleep in her dorm's living room. For a few days, she even gave up her own dorm room for us and stayed at her estranged husband's place. She showed us around, bought us some typical Finnish food and sweets, and was just incredibly nice towards two naive foreigners. We stayed in contact for a bit until she went abroad, and sadly I never managed to find her again. This was before Facebook and she had a very common name, but I hope she knows how much I appreciated her kindness. When I was around 17 I got in my first car accident. It was snowing and very icy, and I was driving home from work. It was evening, but still fairly light because the snow reflected a decent amount of light from the street lamps. I slid on the ice and lost some control of my car. I hit the one in front of me. Not super hard, but enough to dent their back bumper and scratch my front bumper. Since it was my first accident, I sort of uncontrollably panicked and started crying even though it wasn't that bad. We pulled over and put our lights on. An older couple probably in their 60s got out of the car and assessed the damage. I got out, crying and profusely apologizing. The wife immediately was like, "Oh honey, is this your first car accident?" and gave me a little half hug. She asked her husband to grab her purse and got me some tissues from it to wipe away my tears. She said it was no big deal at all, just some scratches. She understood it was a true accident and that I hadn't been driving recklessly, even though I hit them and dented their car. They took care of me and I will never forget it. It's kind of fresh in my mind right now because my daughter is going through driver's training. Of course I hope she never gets in an accident, but if she does I hope she is lucky enough to receive the same understanding from someone. I worked at a gas station at the time. I'd gotten myself a pretty large burn on one arm helping someone lift a grill after it had been used, and he dropped it without warning. A customer saw my arm, bought her stuff and came back 5 minutes later. She'd gotten me an aloe vera plant so I could break off pieces of it and rub on my burn. I thought that was pretty wholesome. I'm male. 47. I was at the hospital because my 82-year-old mom, the core of our family, had just been diagnosed with a rare and advanced form of leukemia. She had perhaps weeks to live. My parents are immigrants to the US. We have no extended family, so it's just mom, dad, and as 4 kids. And mom was really the glue that held us together. So this news was devastating. Mom was quarantined in her room and sleeping. I, overwhelmed with grief and shock, was wandering through the halls of the hospital in a complete daze, utterly despondent. As I walked down a hall in one direction, an employee of the hospital, not a doctor or nurse because she was dressed in civilian clothes, but had a hospital employee badge on, was walking in the opposite direction. Without saying a word, she altered her course and stopped right in front of me. She didn't say anything. She just stopped me in my path, and she spread her arms. I collapsed in her arms and lost it. I hadn't cried like that in 40 years. Mom passed away 11 days later. That was 3 years ago. And I'm tearing up now just thinking about that woman's kindness. I carry that with me. To have that kind of decency to bestow the most intimate and basic of kindnesses to those most in need. Thank you. You're a hospital worker. You helped in ways I can't begin to express. My senior year in high school I stole my lunch every day. I was essentially on my own by then due to reasons and completely broke. I thought I was getting away with it for the entire year. Towards the end of the year the dean called me into the office and explained that they knew I was stealing lunches the whole time. He then gave me a number to enter that would cover my meals. He told me not to worry about all the food, it was being covered by a faculty member. I never knew who it was exactly, but I suspect it was an elderly English teacher I had. She was always trying to sneakily give me cash and refused to let me deny. She even offered to loan me her new BMW when I made a comment about not having money for gas. I loved her. I was in Paris and got into a huge fight with someone I cared about. We bolted in different directions. I jumped on a crowded metro headed for my hotel and wept. Many people stared. But one dear woman fished a tissue out of her purse for me. It was really simple. But it meant a lot. My daughters and I were living in a homeless shelter after leaving my abusive ex. The shelter rules were that we couldn't be in the building between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. So every day I'd strap the kids in the stroller the shelter had given me and we'd either walk to the library, the park, or Walmart. Each of the 3 was at least a mile away. One day it was raining pretty hard and I really didn't want to walk that far in the rain, so I went into a diner that was close by. I had about $100 to my name and I really didn't want to be spending it in a restaurant, but I also really didn't want to be outside in the pouring rain with my kids. I found a cheap $8 meal on the menu and ordered it and took my sweet time slowly dividing it out and feeding it to my kids while watching the window to see if the rain would let up soon. Partway through, a woman who had just finished her meal came and said she had some towels in her car and asked if I'd accept them. I said yes and she went out to her car after paying for her food. She ended up getting in her car and driving away and I just thought, okay, guess she didn't have them in her car after all. Well, she came back about 10 minutes later and handed me 2 brand new towels. I wrapped each kid up in one and thanked her. Then not long after, another stranger, a man this time, came over and without a word put a $10 bill on my table before he went to the counter to pay for his own meal and left. I don't know if either of them had figured out we were homeless or if they just could tell something was wrong, but those 2 acts of kindness meant so much to me and made such a huge difference in terms of my being able to feel like things would be okay. The guy next to me on a plane once woke me up when the flight attendant came around with ice cream and got an ice cream so that I could have 2. I'll never forget that man. There's a spot in the building I work at that nobody wants to work in. It's the coldest area in the building because there's an opening that doesn't close and doesn't have heat, so you can't even eat food safely because the wind will blow it away. I was moved from where I usually am and wasn't prepared for how cold it would be there. I could barely handle money because my fingers felt frozen. A customer noticed how cold it was and without even asking if I was cold, he took off his gloves and gave them to me. I have no idea what his name was, but it was the most thoughtful thing a complete stranger has ever done for me. I still have the gloves too. A homeless man stole a glove out of my friend's pocket and ran. My friend threw the other glove after him, yelling, "Just take it." I was sitting alone at the cafeteria and a teacher came up to me and gave me food that she bought for me. I didn't know who she was. She has never taught me. Had this happened to me in grad school, we were a bunch of weak-ass looking guys, and the coffee cups surrounding our study table were a clear testament to a long night. A professor just came by early morning and dropped off some fresh croissants, gave us a winning smile and left without a word. I can still remember the sense of gratitude we felt. One guy in the Santa Claus costume came to me and gave me some sweets perfectly in the moment, when I almost had a panic attack. We talked for like 15 minutes after that. This folk made my day. He helped me change a flat tire, recommended a place for me to go to the next day to get it checked out. When I got there the next morning, he had stopped by to drop off his business card and to tell them to take good care of my vehicle. When they called me to tell me that the car was ready, they also told me that he had paid for the new tire. Still can't believe it. You don't get people who do that for someone they have never met before. I'm a single, childless guy in my 50s. I'll never have kids or a family. I don't know if it's cultural or biological or some alchemy of the two, but sometimes I want to take care of someone. Doing a simple good deed, stealing from Yiddish, a mitzvah just to help someone out, make me feel good on a very fundamental level. When I was in my early 20s, I ran out of gas 2 blocks from a gas station and had no money. A man came up to my car with a jug of gas and filled my car for me. I asked him for a way to pay him back and he said, "I have a daughter your age and I know how hard it is. Merry Christmas." And he walked away. I will always remember this man. So nice, so giving.